My name's Kate Owen and I'm from Hobart, where I run a design studio with my business partner called Futago, and I've been doing that for about 10 or 12 years. Before that I studied a degree in architecture. Interesting story, and actually this is one photo that I found that I had lying around, and it was taken by the paper when my twin sister and I were in just studying primary school, and it sums up a lot for me, I guess, in terms of always being passionate about art and drawing, and I had no idea what a graphic designer was when I was at school, which was really interesting. I guess it was a bit of a discovery process in terms of what I was naturally drawn to and really interested in lettering and graphic composition and all those sorts of things in art. So then I actually at the end of school studied an architecture degree, which was a huge eye-opener, because I knew nothing about design really, or architecture or the history of architecture. And that was fantastic. And through that I ended up getting into graphic design through my twin sister, who'd actually studied fine arts, majoring in graphic design. So I tell a bit of a quirky story in that we didn't want to be at uni in the same class, so we flipped a coin as to which degree to do. And I obviously draw the short straw of the much more expensive headstead, and studied architecture. But then through, I guess, my strength all the time through uni was graphic communication and being able to communicate ideas and conceptual thinking and those sorts of things. A couple of months ago I was asked to give a talk to some grade 9s and 10s at a local high school, and they wanted me to kind of reflect on how I'd made choices to get to where I am, and it really forced me to think about how I'd gotten into design, and given that I had no idea that there was a profession even called graphic design when I was in year 11 or 12. But actually, yeah, the lettering book was something that I had and used until it fell apart, and always spent so much time on my cover pages rather than the actual contents of the essays. So the lettering book is actually really significant in my career. So yeah, and to start with, I think it's incredibly important to understand context and cultural history and heritage when you're creating or designing, because you're responding to an existing condition, and there's so much that's gone before you. I feel that you need to be aware of what that is, and I feel that if you're designing in isolation without any understanding of where things have come from, it becomes very ubiquitous and homogenous and meaningless in its extreme form. So I think it's a real shame that there isn't really a lot of history to do with graphic design in Australia. And I guess I've always been quite aware of older graphic designers, successful people, Gary Emery, Andrew Ashton, David Pidgeon, and that they had built, they've built kind of good reputations that are international. And I do believe that they actually inherently do have a bit of an Australian style, and I think there's a relaxed, Andrew has an incredibly good sense of humour in his work. Why understanding history and context is really important, because I think without that it's impossible to create something that is Australian. And I think, the work that comes to mind is Andrew Ashton and Gary Emery, for example, and I think Andrew's work has an incredible humour and kind of a bit of self-deprecating, and he's not afraid to kind of have fun and be quite kooky, and I think that it's quite unusual in terms of in a global context. And I think it's really important that kind of continues, because with our industry and changing so quickly and trends just going so fast, it's very easy for everything to become homogenous and have more of a global feel than a local feel. So I guess that comes back to why I really do believe that you need to understand where things come from to help continue that, something that's more local. And I think it's a real shame that there isn't that much understanding of the history of our industry And I'm always disappointed when I'm kind of referring to an older designer in my studio and there's just blank looks from my younger staff. They've got no idea who I'm talking about. And whereas I remember I was always looking to Melbourne and Sydney and hearing about people and who'd done this, and through the AGDA Hall of Fame, I think it's been a great way of kind of capturing those past designers. It's very male dominated, and but even when you look internationally, it's such a thin layer of female influences. So we need to change it. Yeah, and I don't want to go off topic, but I guess it is something that I talk about as our studio philosophy. Is very much it's about context, and that can be audience, but it can also be social history or the context of what's gone on politically. And we unfortunately see it too often when external designers, and this can be across disciplines, so it might be architecture as well, can come in and they can be brilliant, and that's great. We're certainly not wanting to be parochial and saying we can't have external designers, but there's often either a lack of understanding of quite important nuances that really make the difference between something being good, great, and really appropriate, and then also accepted by and loved by the audience it's intended by. So and I guess the way that we create our work, it always comes through understanding the client, their history, or the story around that. And I guess that's why I find it hard answering this question, because I think it's, for me, it's all intertwined. It's not just about history of a profession, but I think there's such importance in understanding history of everything. I don't know that I could define that as being a female thing, because I'm not necessarily, don't come across necessarily as being that empathetic sometimes. So I think it's more, I don't know, maybe it might be a certain sensitivity or understanding or compassion towards the person's needs, and so it's always kind of wanting to put forward the project outcomes above profitability or other sort of gains. So, but again, I don't know if that's I think unfortunately it probably is a bit more of a female trait. I think what I really valued about studying architecture is that it taught me to look to precedents and context and all these things that we're talking about, and how important that is, that research phase, to actually create good work. Architects have always been looking back to work out how to create, and I think that graphic designers need to do the same, because you can't come out of uni and think you're going to be instantly brilliant. It's not possible, and if it is, it's a fluke, I think. So well, I honestly think that my major contribution has been through AGDA and getting involved in that, and I really am pleased that there were some older designers in Hobart at the time who really saw the benefit of getting young, passionate designers involved in AGDA so it could keep going, because it was at a really bit of a sad point in Tassie about 15 years ago. So John Morgan was quite a senior designer, had spent most of his career in Sydney, went out of his way to kind of call up us younger, mid to early 20s and get us involved in AGDA. And I don't know, it really, I think it sparked something inside me that I just became really passionate and excited about it, and it gave me a channel to kind of work on events and ideas and write grants and think about what we could do as a profession and how we can improve things. And that led to, being able to network with other designers nationally and internationally, which was a brilliant opportunity. And I guess in that, I always saw there was a dual benefit in terms of not only betterment of the graphic design community, but it's also professional development. So it's making sure that I was staying on top of my game and being aware of current thinking and what was good practice in terms of, how you might run a studio or internships. And I think that in turn helps the graphic design community, especially in a small place like Hobart. Myself and my business partner have been quite conscious about trying to foster a real professionalism. We've started a paid internship to create a culture of how a studio runs and the business side of graphic design. So, I'd say the central axis of that is AGDA and me sitting on the national board and being able to create the project of bringing AGDA to Hobart for the 2012 awards. That Lynda was incredibly supportive, so she was involved in AGDA a lot, like in the 80s, I think, and she was always although she might not have come to she'd come to quite significant events, but she was very supportive in, congratulating me after a particular event or quite encouragement. And it was really great to know that, because I have a huge amount of respect and awe for Lynda, and it was really, I think that's quite a rare thing actually to hear. I remember even at uni when I just started, the lecturers and architects were talking about this amazing designer, Lynda Warner, and now I think about it, it's quite probably unusual for a female designer to be held up on a pedestal. So I think that's probably a really, if I think about it a bit more, a nice aspiration I think that she set, in that she was very generous in her design and very quietly achieving, but I think she also set a bit of a voice for our industry. Like, she made it visible, because I remember we talked about this in our interview, how graphic design is kind of invisible and people don't necessarily realise it's there, whereas I feel that she actually made a really big impact in making it visible, and that if someone had a logo designed or a product label, they were very proud that Lynda had done that, and I think without that sort of early forging, we would be lagging a lot further behind in Tassies. I think for me, it was being involved in AGDA was a huge networking and professional and personal development opportunity. So just getting the courage to talk to people who I, held in awe of was a really fantastic confidence booster. And by exposing myself to really high quality designers, I think it kept me passionate about achieving high quality work. And so, definitely networking and being constantly inspired to keep striving higher and enter awards internationally and all those sorts of things. And, being respected in your community as well, which was maybe not a bit of a negative as well. I became a little bit disturbed when I'd hear that people were too intimidated to come and talk to me because I was the president of AGDA, or it was like, what? I'm so shy. It's like, that's ridiculous that anyone could feel that way. But it starts to put things in perspective as to, how we make up stories of what we can and can't do. And that's probably the benefits. And it's just given me a lot of confidence to keep doing that and networking. The downsides, I think, are about putting a huge amount of energy into, because I guess I talk about my contribution as being a very community-driven, so it's kind of about AGDA and the community of graphic design, that it became, I spent a lot of energy thinking about that side of things rather than necessarily my own business and my own career and my own relationship and those sorts of things. So it's could almost become too much of a distraction in a way, and it was really hard to kind of strike that balance of doing a good job at everything. So I think that's kind of the pitfall, is that, and I guess it's with anything, like if you've got a public role or something like that, that you have to be really committed, and you have to have committed and supportive people around you to do that, because it does take a lot of time and energy, and you've got to work with people that you might not necessarily choose to work with, so there can be interesting experiences. Yeah, well, I was thinking about this. I guess, the other benefit, of course, is being able to build a personal profile, and through that it's enabled my studio to get kudos and you get talked about in different circles. So, but it's never been done as a primarily personal PR project, but I think that's where, again, making kind of gross generalisations, but men are probably more focused on creating a profile, a personal profile, and using channels like AGDA or, you know, organisations and awards from a purely personal or professionally professional building sort of point of view. Whereas, yeah, I think that, and from what your feedback was, that actually it seems like females are far more interested in what we can do for everyone rather than what can I do for me or my studio. And actually, when I think about it, quite a lot of them are women. So Catherine Griffiths, who is a designer from New Zealand, I came across her work by physically interacting with it when I was in Wellington years ago, and she'd done these beautiful kind of public art installations that were very typographic and used poetry around the wharf areas and situated in really amazing locations. So once I started to kind of investigate her work, I could see similarities between what she did and working with architects and in putting in graphic design in the environment. So I started following her work, and then she organised an international type conference in Wellington a few years later, which I went to, and with some other female graphic design friends of mine from Brisbane. And it was fantastic, and she had organised it with an event organiser from Italy. And I think going to those sorts of things was, again, really important in pushing me to be passionate and to connect with other people. So Catherine's always been one of my favourite designers, and really great to kind of meet as a bit of a mentor and see how she's developed her career. And I think then it's at more of a local level, so Annette Harkis and Tanya Hall, who sat on AGDA with me, and Rita Siao, people like that I found very inspiring as well. And Fiona Sweet, whose work I've just met, but her work is really well known to me. And I think one of my strongest memories of being involved in AGDA was Rita Siao's ongoing passion to try and find women who were well-known graphic designers internationally who actually then had the time to come to Australia and do a tour of Australia and do our international speaking tour. She brought Barbara Glauber out one year, and it was, again, that was really great to meet someone who's got top international reputation, but then to meet them and get to know how they work. So, yeah, I think that sums that up.